The clock on the wall reads 6:50 p.m., February 5th, 2025. Inside the sterile walls of the Huntsville Unit Execution Chamber, Stephen Lawayne Nelson draws his final breath. The lethal cocktail of drugs courses through his veins as witnesses watch through reinforced glass. After 13 years on death row, it's over. But the question that haunts this case isn't when he died. It's whether justice was truly served. Drop a comment. Before we dive deeper, do you think the death penalty serves justice or creates more tragedy? Your perspective might completely change by the end. Stephen Nelson was 37 years old when he died, just 13 days shy of his 38th birthday. For most of his life, he'd been racing toward this moment, though few could have predicted the path that led him here. His final words shocked everyone in that chamber, not because of what he confessed, but because of what he refused to admit even as death approached. Wait, here's what the media never told you. The crime that put Stephen on death row seems straightforward. The brutal murder of Pastor Clint Dobson during a church robbery in Arlington, Texas. 2 victims attacked, 1 killed, 1 barely surviving. The evidence appeared overwhelming. Stolen property in Stephen's possession, victim's blood on his shoes, his fingerprints at the scene. Yet something didn't fit. Stephen's DNA was found on some evidence, but mysteriously absent from the victim's body and murder weapon. He maintained his innocence until the end, insisting 2 friends were the real killers, while he merely stood watch. Those friends had alibis, or did they? The evidence painted a confusing picture. Was Stephen the mastermind, an accomplice, or something else entirely? His brutal second murder would bury these questions under a mountain of violence, but the forensic inconsistencies remained. This version aligns the DNA mystery with the accomplice theory rather than contradicting it. The current version creates confusion about what you're actually arguing happened. February 18th, 1987. Ada, Oklahoma. Stephen Lawayne Nelson enters a world already broken. His mother, drowning in her own demons, leaves him alone for days at a time, sometimes 3 to 4 days, while his abusive father drifts in and out of their lives like a violent storm. At age 3, Stephen makes a choice that should have been a warning to everyone. While his mother sleeps on a bed in the living room, he tries to set it on fire. The flames that nearly consumed her that night were just the beginning. By 6, Stephen's hands are already familiar with breaking and entering. Property crimes, burglaries, thefts, aggravated assault. A rap sheet that would intimidate adult criminals. Oklahoma's juvenile authorities know his name well. Despite counseling and probation attempts, nothing stops his escalating violence. The system shuffles him through multiple interventions, but Stephen's anger only grows. When his family moves to Texas, hoping for a fresh start in Tarrant County, the violence follows. At 14, he's sentenced to an indeterminate term in juvenile prison, rare for property crimes at his age. Originally sentenced to 9 months, Stephen spends over 3.5 years locked up due to continued infractions and 4 high-level disciplinary hearings. Forensic psychologists would later identify a chilling pattern. Childhood fire setting often predicts future violent behavior. The same destructive impulse that nearly killed his mother would manifest in increasingly dangerous ways. Social workers who encountered Stephen during these early years speak of a system overwhelmed and under-resourced. They recognize the warning signs but lack the tools to intervene effectively. By 18, Stephen had been arrested 23 times. The scared, neglected child who once tried to burn his mother's bed was becoming something far more dangerous. His most violent years were just beginning, and they would culminate in a church on a quiet Thursday morning. Have you seen these warning signs in someone you know? Share your story in the comments. March 3rd, 2011. A quiet Thursday morning at NorthPointe Baptist Church in Arlington, Texas. Pastor Clint Dobson, 28 years old, arrives early to prepare for the day. Judy Elliott, 69, the church secretary, is already at work. Neither expects the horror about to unfold. Stephen Nelson, 24 and on probation, bursts into the church seeking valuables. He confronts Dobson in his office, demanding money. When Dobson resists, Stephen strikes him repeatedly, likely with the butt of a firearm, causing wounds to his forehead from the computer monitor stand as he falls. The pastor tries desperately to defend himself, but Stephen wraps a computer extension cord around his neck, strangling him before placing a plastic bag over his face to finish the job. Here's where the case gets strange. Despite this brutal attack, Stephen's DNA was completely absent from Pastor Dobson's body. How is that possible? Elliott witnesses the attack and tries to flee, but Stephen catches her. He beats her savagely with a blunt object, fracturing her skull and causing massive internal bleeding. She's left unconscious, her face destroyed, arms and legs broken, assumed dead. The forensic evidence tells a compelling story. Stephen's fingerprints are found throughout the crime scene. Victim's blood stains his shoes and clothing. Dobson's laptop, Elliott's credit cards, her car keys, all discovered in Stephen's possession. He's caught using the stolen cards to buy clothes and jewelry. Despite blood evidence on Stephen's shoes, advanced DNA analysis revealed something investigators couldn't explain. Mixed DNA profiles that didn't match any known suspects. But something doesn't add up. Despite the overwhelming evidence placing Stephen at the scene, his DNA is mysteriously absent from Dobson's body. The murder weapon, whatever was used to bludgeon both victims, is never found. This missing weapon would become crucial to understanding what really happened. Crime scene reconstruction experts noted the attack patterns suggested multiple assailants. The angle of wounds on Dobson indicated he was struck by someone significantly taller, while other injuries suggested a shorter attacker. A crucial 2-hour window remains unaccounted for. Security cameras from neighboring businesses show Stephen's car in the area, but also capture 2 other vehicles that were never fully investigated. Elliott survives against all odds. After 6 months of hospitalization and metal plates reconstructing her shattered face, she emerges forever changed but alive. Her first words to police would challenge everything they thought they knew about this case. What would you do if you survived such a brutal attack? Judy Elliott's response will amaze you. Elliott's recovery defied medical expectations. Doctors gave her less than a 10% chance of survival with the extent of her brain injuries. The metal plates holding her face together, a titanium mesh covering 40% of her skull, serve as permanent reminders of that terrible day. But her mental recovery proved even more remarkable. I remember seeing 2 men, she told detectives during her first coherent interview 3 months after the attack. One was doing the hitting, one was watching. When arrested, Stephen offers an explosive defense. He wasn't alone. He names 2 accomplices, Anthony Springs and Claude Jefferson, claiming they committed the actual murders while he served as lookout outside. Springs and Jefferson both have alibis. Or do they? What investigators discovered about those alibis will make you question everything about this case. Stephen's story seemed impossible to believe until investigators uncovered evidence that cast serious doubt on his accomplices' supposed whereabouts. But Stephen's credibility would soon be destroyed by a second act of violence that sealed his fate forever. The second murder that sealed Stephen's fate, and the timing that seems too convenient to be coincidence. The following events occurred after Stephen's arrest, but before his trial. The timeline was deliberately obscured by prosecutors to strengthen their death penalty case. November 2011. Stephen arrives at Tarrant County Jail awaiting trial, not yet convicted. His new home, a crowded facility where violence simmers beneath the surface. From the beginning, Stephen exhibits violent, disruptive behavior, threatening guards, breaking prison property, flooding his cell with black fire retardant liquid. Was Stephen's violent behavior proof of guilt, or the desperate actions of someone knowing they were being framed? But Stephen's jailhouse antics were nothing compared to what came next. The act that would seal his fate forever, and the timing that investigators called suspiciously convenient. March 19, 2012. Just 3 weeks before crucial evidence about Jefferson's false alibi would surface, Stephen encounters Jonathan Holden, a mentally ill inmate serving time for theft. The official story: when Holden mutters a racial slur, it ignites Stephen's rage. But Jonathan Holden's medical records tell a different tale. Holden suffered from schizophrenia and often spoke incoherently. Inmates report he frequently made nonsensical statements, not targeted racial attacks. So why did Stephen react so violently to a mentally ill man's ramblings? Some investigators believe Holden may have overheard something about the church murders that made him a liability. What happens next reveals the true depths of violence or desperate silencing. Stephen lures Holden to his cell bars, fashioning a noose from blankets. He convinces Holden it's a fake suicide attempt to earn a prison transfer. The murder occurred exactly 16 days after Stephen's lawyer discovered Professor Martinez's testimony about the missing chemistry test. Coincidence? Holden complies. Stephen loops the makeshift noose around his neck, places his feet against the bars, and pulls with both hands. For 4 agonizing minutes, he strangles the life out of Jonathan Holden. Witnesses later report Stephen performed a celebration dance and used a broom as a guitar after the murder. Do you think Stephen killed Holden to silence him, or was this just random violence? Let us know in the comments. When guards discover Holden's body, the official report states Stephen showed no remorse. This second murder virtually guaranteed his death sentence would be carried out. No appeals court would spare a man who killed twice. The brutal killing of a mentally ill inmate destroyed any remaining sympathy for Stephen and overshadowed questions about his original case. The Holden family didn't let their son's death slide. In 2014, 2 years after Jonathan was killed, his family filed a devastating civil rights lawsuit against Tarrant County over his death. The lawsuit alleged that jail officials failed to protect a mentally ill inmate from a known violent offender. Court documents from the lawsuit revealed that Stephen had been flagged as a high-risk violent inmate, but was housed in the same unit as vulnerable prisoners like Holden. The case exposed systemic failures in the jail's protective custody protocols. The family eventually settled, and Tarrant County agreed to pay $350,000. A tacit admission that something went terribly wrong that day. But the settlement came with a non-disclosure agreement that buried the most damaging evidence about jail conditions in Stephen's case. October 1st, 2012, Lawayne Nelson faces a Tarrant County jury on charges of capital murder and attempted capital murder. The prosecution paints him as a predator, a career criminal who destroyed lives for mere valuables. They systematically present the evidence: stolen property in his possession, victims' blood on his shoes, his fingerprints throughout the crime scene. But Stephen's defense attorney challenges their narrative. On the witness stand, Stephen maintains his innocence, naming Anthony Springs and Claude Jefferson as the real killers. He claims he entered the church with both men, stole the laptop and credit cards, then waited outside as a lookout while they brutally attacked the victims. The defense points to troubling gaps in the evidence. Jefferson's alibi appeared rock solid, taking a chemistry test at university. But when Stephen's lawyer questioned Professor Martinez, the revelation was stunning. There was no chemistry test scheduled that day. Despite this bombshell, Jefferson's alibi isn't thoroughly challenged by prosecutors. Why? During the final submissions, the prosecution aggressively sought the death penalty for Nelson. They highlighted his extensive criminal history, stretching back to childhood, and brought up evidence of his multiple incidents of rule-breaking and prison violence. including the killing of Jonathan Holden while awaiting trial. After 6 hours of deliberation, the jury returns with their verdict: guilty on all counts. On October 16, 2012, 25-year-old Lawayne Nelson becomes one of the youngest inmates on Texas death row. Stephen arrived on death row angry, defiant, and seemingly destined to die alone for his crimes. But here's what changes everything. In 2020, someone unexpectedly enters Stephen's life and begins to see past the monster everyone else saw. Through a prison pen pal website, Stephen meets Noa Dubois, a woman from France living in Montreal. She's searching for someone who understands her troubled past. Their correspondence begins cautiously. Stephen loses male privileges for 3 months due to infractions, prompting Dubois to tell him he needs to shape up because someone is waiting for his letters. Their relationship deepens through handwritten letters. Dubois becomes Stephen's most devoted advocate, driven by an unwavering belief in his innocence and a determination to fight for him no matter the cost. Finally, someone believes in Lawayne Nelson and refuses to give up on him. By 2024, Dubois moves temporarily to Texas, hosting rallies with anti-death penalty advocates outside the very church where Stephen's victims were attacked. Her passionate advocacy brings new attention to inconsistencies in his case that had been overlooked for years. As Stephen's execution date approaches, Dubois' unwavering support becomes his lifeline. But will love and loyalty be enough to save him from death row? Could an innocent man have been on death row for 13 years? Share your opinion below. January 28, 2025. Stephen's final appeal is denied by the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals. Hours later, the U.S. Supreme Court delivers the crushing blow: no stay of execution. After 13 years of legal battles, the end has arrived, February 5, 2025. Stephen's final day begins in the death house at Huntsville. Noa Dubois visits one last time, bringing their small dog, a brief moment of normalcy in the sterile environment of death. Stephen barely touches the standard prison meal offered. Texas abolished special last meal requests years ago, but it wouldn't have mattered. Food holds no meaning when you're counting minutes. Outside, the reactions are divided. Some members of Dobson's church have waited 14 years for this moment, viewing it as long overdue justice. But Judy Elliott's son speaks differently. Their family has forgiven Stephen, though consequences must remain. The complexity of mercy versus justice plays out in real time. In your heart, do you believe Stephen Nelson was guilty? What's your verdict? 5:30 p.m. Final preparations begin. Stephen is moved to the execution chamber, the same sterile room where 574 condemned inmates have taken their final breath since Texas resumed executions in 1982. 6:15 p.m. Stephen is strapped to the gurney, 4 lines inserted. Through the viewing window, witnesses gather: victims' families, Stephen's supporters, media representatives, and state officials. The weight of finality fills the air. Stephen's final words are directed to his wife: "I will always love you no matter. Our love is uncontrollable. I'm at peace. I'm ready to be at home. Let's ride, Warden." 6:18 p.m. The lethal injection begins. Pentobarbital courses through his veins. 6:50 p.m. Lawayne Nelson is pronounced dead. Lawayne Nelson died maintaining his partial innocence. If this story impacted you, like, share, and subscribe for more deep dives into cases where justice and truth don't always align. Your engagement helps these important stories reach more people.